Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is William Tincup, and we are doing a podcast for eTechie, a wonderful software company in Tampa, Florida. I've got on the phone Tom Janz, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of good stuff. But for the first, out of the gate, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get Tom to kind of do an introduction of himself, because I could do the introduction, but I would completely mess it up. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Do you want to have, if you want to give me a little bit of a time frame on that, because that could go a long time or it could go a short time, and probably a short time is better. But.
You've probably got a curriculum vitae. No, we only have 30 minutes, so give me the abridged version.
You're right. Yeah, well, my background is that of industrial psychology. So I right out of college, out of University of Winnipeg, actually. I went to the University of Minnesota, got a PhD in IO psychology. And from there, I actually taught at Canadian universities for the first 15 years of my career, 16 years of my career. And first in a faculty of engineering, then in a faculty of business, and then finally at the University of Calgary, where I stayed for 10 years. From there, I went into the world of industrial psychology applied to industry through a company called Personnel Decisions International. I went to Dallas, spent about 10 years in Dallas, actually longer than that, but 10 years at PDI. Yep. And then moved around from PDI to my own firm, kind of trying to start up a company that would offer consulting services. Found that I had uniquely bad timing, instincts for timing and doing that. And so ended up working a couple more times in companies like Lominger, Guru Worldwide, and Beatrice Hallwig International.
Yeah, of course. Did you work with them as they were acquired by IBM, or was that before?
It was before. Yeah, I was a director of assessment and chief scientist at Beatrice Hallwig. This is a similar kind of position at Guru International, but that was in San Francisco.
Sure.
And then in Minneapolis was the Lominger. And then following that, started a company, first a small Canadian company, and then a company called People Assessments. That's the headquarters is Boca Raton, and it's a small kind of startup that I've been at for several years now. And we're actually just in the process of perhaps selling that off to an organization in Saudi Arabia. So the future is yet to unfold.
That's nice. Well, but you're already in heaven in Boca, so you've already made it. Let's be honest.
Right. It's pretty nice here, I have to say.
So, all right, let's dig into People Assessments as it's currently framed up. Tell us just about the business as it is.
Well, currently the business offers psychometric assessments for entry-level, high-volume jobs. Topics, focus around things like customer service, dependability, safety, tenure, sales, performance factors relating to the success of people in the high volume. And the primary author of those instruments is Dr. George Pynan, who I had worked with at Personnel Decisions. And then we also offer some other tools for biodata assessments, behavioral interviewing, where we will can actually collect answers in an online interview and have those answers scored and presented in an integrated report. And some other situational judgment tests, and there's a range of psychometric instruments available from People Assessments and we also partner with other companies that provide the sort of top-end services. Right. companies out of Minneapolis, Assessment Associates International. And so we kind of cover the waterfront that way by offering assessments that are job related, that have relatively short administration time, so that we're not having candidates sit on a site for a long period of time, but that have been shown in previous research, extensive research, to be valid predictors of performance, and provide a comprehensive picture for hiring managers and recruiters to be able to make initial decisions and sort of automate the process as much as we can, but we don't try to provide all the services of an advanced ATS.
Right. Are you starting to see, because you're decidedly pre-hire, and there's a lot of assessments that obviously there's assessments for everywhere. You can safety assessments, and you can be leadership. You can do all kinds of good stuff for the audience. So you're pre-hire. Do you find yourself more in the area of pre-apply or post-apply? Or is there a mixture?
Yeah, it's a mixture. I mean, more of our clients will start off with post-apply. We have moved some to the point where the assessment is in a pre-apply. Well, they obviously have to register first to actually take the assessment, but they don't complete sort of the full legal application until later on in the process. Because that's where, in one of the companies that we've worked with, we see the greatest amount of candidate drop-off is when their candidates are asked to kind of provide detailed previous employment histories and educational backgrounds. More of the more sophisticated ATSs are able to just get that off of, read that out of a resume and then just have it confirmed. Or even nowadays, you see the easy apply situation where people are able to get that out of a LinkedIn profile.
Right.
So the goal is to provide both sides of the equation, the candidate and the employer, with better information about what the characteristics of the job are, what is going to make a person a fit for the job and the company, and to provide the employer with better information about how well this person is likely to be aligned with company goals, objectives, culture, and all that, but also be able to perform the basic tasks that are going to create value on the job, because that's right. Essentially why you're
doing it.
Yeah, that's why you're parting with salary dollars.
So our worlds have crisscrossed a couple times, because you worked with Lewis, and Lewis helped kind of start and fund and had a great relationship with a company called People Report.
Oh, right.
In Dallas, and I was on the People Report's board.
I remember that.
And so, and you've obviously, Dr. Charles Handler. You probably crisscrossed the world with him and all the other characters at PsyOp. So I want to kind of get into misconceptions, if you will.
Sure.
Because you've got a PhD, which automatically scares people, right? Because you're smarter than everybody else.
I know enough about assessments to know that's not true.
but I know that HR and recruiting don't really understand. I did a lot of work with Hogan Assessments years ago, and one of the things as a marketer I told them was, "Hey guys, you guys know the science." And you're really deep into the science. The problem is you're talking over people's heads. Like they don't know the science, and they might not even care about science, which that's neither here nor there. But you're talking over their head. I'm not asking you to dumb things down, but just bring it to a level where they understand what you're trying to do. And that was that. But in your travels, what have you seen in terms of kind of what people kind of get wrong about assessments?
Well, I think people. The number one thing that I think they get wrong is that assessments can tell them everything they want to know without having to try to triangulate based on looking at, 3 or 4 different data points, they want the easy answer, right? And in the high volume hiring, and you have to give them a red, yellow, green kind of very simple recommends, strongly recommends with reservation, does not recommend. Those kinds of very clear overall indicators. When you're dealing with more professional technical hires, then typically hiring managers want to see more nuanced information, but they want to assume that the score report that they get and the numbers they see on there tell them everything they need to know, and that's not likely to be the case. They've got to look at that information and try and integrate it with what they see in the resume, what they hear in the interview, and particularly if they have done their proper homework and conducted a good behavioral interview where they've gotten examples of the person's ability to deliver performance in those situations and circumstances that are likely to be they're going to have to face on the job. Right.
Yeah, I concur. I think people are looking for that silver bullet, and they're looking for it across all of, not just in assessments, but in skills testing, and all across they're looking for the magic thing that says, oh, by the way, this is a perfect hire. They're going to come in and do a great job forever, and you'll never make any mistakes. We don't live in that world.
Right. It's kind of like you get the assessment for the same reason that managers hire consultants, and that is to have somebody to blame if it doesn't work out.
It's a little bit of CYA, a little bit of a credit report. Let me ask you, because you use a term on your website called predictive psychometrics. I do want to kind of dig into that a little bit, because I see in my world on the HR technology side, I see a lot of use of the word predictive. Some reflective, but most of it is predictive. And I want to kind of get your take on, what does that really mean? What does it really mean for you, predictive psychometrics?
Well, predictive means that there has been some evidence collected to show that scores on this assessment actually relate to independent measures of value on the job. And what I mean by independent measures is you really just can't ask you can't ask performers, how do you rate your performance? I mean, it can't be a self-rating or a self-report. It needs to be either quantitative information collected as a function of person's, obviously in sales jobs, it can be actual sales recorded, in a quarterly, annual kind of sales recording, a sales measurement system, or in other jobs that have where there's key measures of production and profitability. Business unit managers will have P&L numbers that can be measured against the predictors. When you have the time to collect performance information and you have the psychometric information, you look at the relationship between the two. Predictive means that the scores collected from the assessment actually predict future performance. Reflective is more a situation where you measure people's scores on underlying traits or characteristics, and then you get some indication about whether other people feel they share those characteristics. But that's not so much predictive as when you're looking at predictive performance outcomes.
Right. And do you advise folks to use a lot of different types of assessments? And then second question around that is, you've used the word high volume a couple of times. I want to make sure the audience understands that. Is that repetitive hires like bank tellers, or in the food industry, cashiers in retail, things like that? Is that what you mean by that?
Right. High volume just means they're typically entry-level positions,
Gotcha.
And that the company is hiring a lot of people performing virtually the same job.
Got it.
When you get into the IT and medical specialization, then often there'll be a very small number of people performing the same job. And there you need to, the requirements of technical capabilities are stronger. But even once you have those technical capabilities, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to work within a team, deliver performance that satisfies customers, etc.
So I got to ask about AI, machine learning, because it's top of mind for damn near everybody in our industry. What's the intersection point with what's going on there in that science and what you know about your science? Where's the crisscross? Where do you see it being used today, and where do you think it's going to be used in the future?
Well, artificial intelligence means machines acting more like people, having thinking capability. In the area of psychometrics, there has been, for a period of time, a kind of testing called adaptive testing, where in the traditional psychometrics is kind of taking a set of items and everybody gets exactly the same items, regardless of how they perform on the first few set of items. They go through the same assessment track and path all the way through. And that means that you have to have more items than if the assessment learned about you as you're going through the assessment. And if you score very well on the first few items that are set at an average level of difficulty, you start getting tougher and tougher items. And whereas the other person who scored average or below average is getting easier items, until the system is able to determine where your level of ability lies, or your level of standing on personality dimensions as well. It doesn't have to be strictly ability. So artificial intelligence then has the assessment behaving more intelligently with regards to the candidates. And I think you'll see there are some tests out I've heard of now that are very short but very powerful. And the organizations, I think the armed forces are using some, are very protective of those items, because once you really have to it can't get out there about which items send you up the curve, and so they require that they be done in a proctored environment where you can't actually screen, you can't do screen captures and get the item set downloaded that way. But that allows for very fast and accurate assessment, and that's probably, that is artificial intelligence applied in the psychometrics world. Machine learning is I think further off, and because machine learning is essentially learning from the assessment, being able to have both large amounts of predictor and performance information in the same database. And what you find is that there's either a lot of predictor information, a lot of test items have administered to a lot of people, but it's very hard to collect the performance information. Or you'll have other situations where, such as in sports, where there's a lot of performance information, but not a lot of good predictors. Without having both together, machine learning requires that the process learn from experience. So to learn from experience, you have to have an outcome. You have to have some observed event, an outcome from that event, and then you apply the knowledge that's picked up between, what happens when we do X, or when we ask question X, and then refine the assessment over time, because we can see that this particular item isn't collecting as much information as this other item. Right. So artificial intelligence, I think, is has been discussed and is being applied in a number of settings, and usually is combined with gamification. Mm-hmm. Whereas machine learning requires, I think, a greater depth of data and data collection and accumulation, and it will happen as we go into this Internet of Things in more depth, because in the Internet of Things we collect very reliable predictors, and we can use those very reliable measures of performance that can be collected off cell phone data, off of other kinds of sensors that are in the work environment, so that we have this much larger amounts of predictor and criterion information. But the key thing about it is they're all very reliable, because the data is not a matter of asking people but their subjective feelings or preferences or reactions. The data is all objectively collected by these sensors. So if the data, objectively collected data by the sensors, is related to performance, and it can be all accumulated, then that's where all these new advanced statistics available through R and some of these more sophisticated platforms can tease out the relationships and come up with predictive power.
Right. Right. Well, all right. So I got one last question. I think I could talk to you all day. It's your favorite story about where assessments have worked. So through your travels, especially in the corporate world, what's your favorite kind of anecdote or your favorite story where you tried something and it just, magic, clouds parted, seas parted, the whole bit, like it just worked?
Yeah, I mean, worked can be defined in different ways, but in one case we worked with a company called Standard Coffee, and we put assessments in for route salespeople, which was their dominant job. They had more of that than anything else in that company, but also for other roles, and they were able to see and track very significant declines in their workman's compensation and in turnover among people on the route sales, so that their CEO was able to say, well, what's going on here? Because I'm seeing unheard of levels of retention, and I'm seeing that we are just are the dollars that we're spending on workman's compensation have just dropped off precipitously. So that was one that I was very pleased about. Another one happened in a global financial institution, where we were able to put together a process that worked very well by starting with a virtual job tryout at the front, and then moving it into some ability assessments, and then ending up with a comprehensive personality, a Big Five type personality tool, and having the candidate move seamlessly through all of these different processes, and yet not feel any disruption. So that was one where we put together a sort of a unique solution by integrating with best practice providers from several different companies.
I love that, because you reduce the friction, you reduce the drop off. If they kind of feel like they just are just kind of going from one thing to the next, that's kind of e-commerce 101. Right. Tom, I just a pleasure to talk with you today, and I want to thank eTechie for putting us together. And I literally think I could talk to you for hours. So thank you for being generous with your time. And thank everyone for listening today. And everyone have a wonderful day.